talk about the number one player in the state of Mississippi making a surprise commitment on Wednesday. And that is Tristen Keys, the 5-star wide receiver who's out of Hattiesburg. Of course, that's South Mississippi. This is not necessarily an area that is, diehard Ole Miss and things like that. But the surprising piece was that he committed to LSU on Wednesday. And the Tigers made a really nice impression when he was there on his visit. And a lot of people had this one pegged as Tennessee and Alabama and those type of schools kind of setting the pace for him. And instead, he drops a commitment on Wednesday. I think it was like midday. I mean, it was just out of nowhere. And this is going to be really interesting to watch how this one unfolds, because obviously he's highly touted. Obviously he's, in state for Ole Miss, and they would love to, continue to have a chance to get him. And the next kind of few weeks are going to really determine, I think, maybe how to read the room on that recruitment for a lot of schools. Because whenever you make a commitment, there's usually like this cooling off period for all the sides, where especially this early, kids will kind of actually shut it down for a minute, maybe take a little bit of a break, and coaches will be like, all right, we're going to let him have his space and committed. And we don't want to make it seem like we're over the top with you. But they're now going to have to navigate this as a flip target, which is interesting because, of course, last year, Ole Miss flipped Caleb Cunningham from Alabama. And the funny thing about this is Tristen Keys was expected at Ole Miss this weekend. So that was something that we were kind of hanging on to going into this weekend, because he hadn't been back this year. He hadn't made his way over there. And so I kind of heard about that on Tuesday and was like, okay, all right, I'm going to sit on this piece of information for, the next few days, see if he actually shows up in Oxford, and he commits on Wednesday. So really just an interesting surprise commitment there by the number one player in the state of Mississippi, a top 10 prospect, number one wide receiver in the country. And look, this time last year, LSU had the number one receiver in the country committed in Corey Moore, and he ended up signing with Oregon, which, a lot of Texas people would have liked to have back. So this one, I think, I'm not saying that he's for sure going to flip to Ole Miss or flip elsewhere, because, LSU's got a good little run of receivers, but this is a recruitment that now Ole Miss is going to have to, they at least know where the starting blocks are now. I feel like they can say, okay, we've got however many months to flip you, and we're going to have to overcome. I think he committed to LSU the day of or the day after Jamar Chase signed the big ticket deal. So, probably a lot of, LSU, just positivity kind of rolling in, and he ends up committing after that visit. So this will be a really, really key recruitment as far as how the class's ceiling ends up. If you get a Tristen Keys, all of a sudden you're, that much higher in the rankings, and you're, you really could probably push for a top 15 type of class, the way the class is looking, at least, and as far as the top targets they're in on. But, that's kind of my early take. It is middle of March. That's right. 9 months away from National Signing Day or the early signing period, which is when I'm sure Tristen will probably sign. But Mississippi recruiting never fails to deliver a random 5-star committing on a Wednesday around lunch.
Exactly right. And a handful of things. One, Ole Miss has been here before. You touched on how I was going to go about it. Caleb Cunningham committed to 3 different schools before he ended up signing with Ole Miss. This is now part of the process in 2025. It was always a part of it to an extent, the whole flip game and Mary Flipmas and all this kind of stuff. But really right now, even the commitments Ole Miss gets, none of it really is cemented until late into the fall, right? Yeah. Once you get into October, November, guys that have been in that class for months, that's different. I don't expect Tristen Keys to have shut down his recruitment now because he's committed to LSU, is what I'm saying. This is part of that process. It's leverage for them. It is. I mean, going to his next visit, if it's Ole Miss this weekend, like you said.
Yeah, if he shows up, that's where it's going to be really interesting.
The leverage he has now, saying, well, this is what I've got, because it is a very matter-of-fact discussion now with these top-ranked guys. It's like, what can you offer me? And Ole Miss is going to meet whatever they love Tristan Keys. They love Tristan Keys. I mean, they would they're going to meet his number best they can if it makes sense, and or they're going to say, well, just like with Deuce Knight, go to the SEC rival. We'll get you in the portal next year. You know, there's stuff that goes into this decision making, goes into this that just wasn't like it was in the old days. So that's one of the first things. This is very early. Yeah, you'd ideally want him to have committed to Ole Miss, but I would be saying the same things if he had committed to Ole Miss. He didn't even include Ole Miss in his Final Four, right?
Yeah, they weren't generally viewed as like. I mean,
no.
I went back and looked. Like Caleb Cunningham was at least talking about Ole Miss at this.
Yeah,
point.
he's not.
He's not really doing that.
He's not doing that. And that's where, so that's where it tells me they've got a little bit more work to do. Because you're absolutely right. It's a really important point. Mississippi has always been like this. In the coast, man, you get to Biloxi and the Matt Luke territory, you get some rebels down there. But Hattiesburg, that's LSU country. That's southern Mississippi. That's how it's always been. Now, Ole Miss has had success in Hattiesburg. AJ and Anthony Maddox both are obvious examples of that, but like even they took some time. I mean, AJ Maddox was committed to Texas A&M for a while. There's a lot about recruiting that has changed. One thing that you don't need to get too caught up in is when a kid commits. Like if a kid commits early, at the end of the day, who are your targets come late October and November? You want to see if you got momentum going, and that's what a lot of recruiting is. So this is not good for the momentum piece, but especially since he didn't even bring him up. Now they know what the work they got to do. The number two thing, you brought up Jamar Chase signing the highest contract of any, which is great. Ole Miss has two players in the top 5 of wide receiver contracts in the history of the NFL with DK and AJ Brown. So
100%.
Ole Miss is going to hit that hard. And then the third piece of that, does he show this weekend? Right?
Yeah.
Does he show?
I'm going to just laugh if he does. I'm just going to laugh.
But that would be the most that would be the most own brand in 2025 recruiting thing that development to happen if he does show on Saturday.
Exactly.
I fully expect him to. Like for me, it'll be if he's been telling Ole Miss, if he's been telling Ole Miss he's coming, I fully expect him to, because commitments don't mean jack turkey. They don't mean anything.
I mean, Jaraylon McCoy, when he committed to LSU, was back at Ole Miss like 2 weeks later.
Yes,
and then. I don't even know if he ended up visiting LSU in that little period of January, but then he definitely was at State, and then he came back to Ole Miss, decommitted, was going to flip, and then didn't, and now he's continuing.
He's everywhere. You see him pictures of Billy Napier in Florida.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, he was just at Florida.
Kids, they're going to enjoy this process. This is a once in a lifetime process, and this is one of the few times over the next couple of years where they have real leverage to kind of set themselves up. I'm not saying it's totally a leverage play for Tristan Keys. But commitments now, especially early commitments, need to be taken for what they're worth, which is nothing.
Yeah,
you need to understand that if anything, there's simply another piece of leverage to take to those other teams that really want you to see what they can do. Because, I'm sure he's excited. I mean, coming off an official, everybody has a good official visit. That used to be the joke in the old days. You never heard anybody come off an official visit and go, you know what, that kind of sucked. That place was kind of crappy. That didn't happen. It was so silly to write those stories when we go stand out there at the Manning Center and pick your prospect is leaving, right? Zay Harris is leaving. He's like, man, what an amazing visit. I had so-and-so hosting me. I did this. It was amazing. Of course, official visits are amazing. That's what they're designed
you walk into the hotel room and there's cookies all over the bed. Like, of course.
Now they're rolling out a red carpet in a way for guys like Tristan Keys that you've never seen before. It's like they don't even have to compete at camps.
Yeah.
They don't. They arrive. They've got a special golf cart waiting for them, right? Yeah. First, they got a special driver. If they flew in, they got a special driver, right, from the airport.
The Mercedes Sprinter.
So it's a much different world in that way. That's why I say it's too early to panic. The one thing that shot the antennas up for me, though, he hasn't been talking about Ole Miss like Caleb was.
Yep.
And I know how bad Ole Miss wants Tristan Keys and how they've been going after him really, really hard. Right. And to not get even some lip service, that's the part for me that's like, man, they got a little bit more work to do. So a couple of things with this. I know Ole Miss fans this morning are probably like, dead gone.
Yeah, that's 10 minutes, boys. Shut up.
Yeah. But I remind you that, again, it's Mississippi recruiting. As Billy said to start, it is Mississippi recruiting. This is a guy who's not from this state originally. He's here now covering Ole Miss with us. I mean, And he knows, but he's been recruiting for so long. He knows this state has a reputation of.
It does.
I mean, it's crazy.
Guys get
drama.
kidnapped left and right back in the old days and just
Yeah.
shut away and then just show up without their family at their signing ceremony and just sign. Yeah.
It's fun in that way, but it's
Yeah.
also, if you're an Ole Miss person and if you're watching this, you are, days like this happen.
Yeah, the blood pressure is like,
yeah, Caleb Cunningham committed to Alabama. Like Aiden Williams. My favorite ones was like when Dante Moncrief went to Oklahoma State, right, late in process because he just wanted somebody to pay attention to him again.
Tyler Lockhart last cycle. I mean, that was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Even in Mississippi recruiting, that was unbelievable. I feel like
Mississippi. I don't blame these kids for having a blast with it. I really don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I would do the exact same. However, if you're a fan, it can become, especially when the result is like it was yesterday and he ends up at LSU, it can be what the heck's going on. And we're here to tell you there's a long way to go. Now, this is not the place you want to be.
Yeah.
This isn't the place you want to be. Obviously, you want to be out in front every single development in his recruitment, but it is March. It is March, and the first signing day is not until December.